Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Prophecy Update. As always, it's our desire to bring the events that are happening in the world from a biblical standpoint and a prophetic standpoint as well. So thanks for joining us this week. What we're going to discuss this program is what Paul warned us all about. He talked about perilous times would come in the last days. And we are now seeing this as we watch the convergence of events happen. We're watching evil manifest, demonic activity manifest, apostasy manifest. Everything is moving in the direction in which the last days were predicted. And so Paul talked about the church and society and how it would be in the last days. And what we have just seen with the recent shooting in Texas is another example of the last days, where our society has gotten so far away from God, it has created monsters that go and kill their grandmother and kill innocent children at 10 years old and then kill 2 adults as well. These are monsters that are produced by our society because our society has jettisoned Judeo-Christian ethics and principles and morality. They've kicked God out of the church, out of the schools, out of society, and this is what you get. You get monsters that are created because they have no morality. Paul told Timothy that in the last days perilous times would come. What he meant by that is that the last days of the church would be its worst. The church would be in the worst situation possible, not only with itself, with apostasy, but also in society as well. It's interesting that the Greek word for perilous times is chalepos, which means that times will be hard to deal with, hard to bear, troublesome, dangerous, harsh, fierce, savage, due to the violence that emanates out of the ungodly. And that's what we're seeing. The removal of Christianity has created ungodliness, demonic, satanic types of morality, if you want to call it that, or immorality. And that's what our society produces, and it produces monsters. And as I mentioned, this Texas shooting by an 18-year-old, this guy was clearly demonically inspired. There's no doubt about that. His name was Salvador Ramos, and he was wearing body armor during the shooting spree and was armed with a handgun and a rifle. And again, he is nothing but a monster our society has created. And he goes in there to Robb Elementary School and he murders 19 children for no reason whatsoever. It's senseless. It makes me angry. It makes all of us angry to watch this. He injured several others, killed 2 adults, and then police finally shot him down. Well, here's what we want to talk about. In this update, we want to discuss how our ungodly society and its satanic immorality creates monsters like this. So we're going to look at that piece by piece in what Paul told Timothy. So for more on the story, watch this news clip that succinctly tells you what happened.
Breaking news tonight, a shooting at an elementary school in Texas leaves 18 children, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders dead, as well as 2 adults, as well as a suspect. It is the deadliest school shooting in Texas history and the deadliest since the Sandy Hook shooting almost a decade ago.
All of this unfolding at Robb Elementary School in the small town of Uvalde, Texas this morning at about 10:30. That town is about 70 miles just north of the U.S.-Mexico border, 80 miles west of San Antonio. We've also learned that the 18-year-old shooter is dead, apparently killed by police responding to that shooting.
Now, the video you're looking at shows parents at a civic center in the town of Uvalde where they were given information about their children. President Biden addressing the nation just a short while ago, and his remarks very personal.
To lose a child is like having a piece of your soul ripped away. There's a hollowness in your chest. You feel like you're being sucked into it and never going to be able to get out. Suffocating.
The flag at the White House was lowered to half staff after the school shooting in Texas, and President Biden has ordered flags on all federal buildings nationwide to be lowered as well.
Las Vegas Mayor Carolyn Goodman responding and tweeting, "We can't imagine the pain the families in Uvalde, Texas are experiencing. The loss of these innocent lives is beyond comprehension. We are horrified, and may their souls rest in peace." And from Governor Sisolak, he says, quote, "Our hearts are broken again. Kathy and I are sending our love and our prayers to the Uvalde community in Texas in the aftermath of this horrific shooting."
CCSD also releasing a statement this evening extending support. It reads in part, quote, "This unfathomable event impacts students, educators, staff, and administrators across the country who care deeply about the health and well-being of every student. Safety remains a top priority for all school districts, including here in Southern Nevada, and we will continue to follow this story through the evening, bring you updates as they do become available."
So, of course, after all this is said and done, the first thing the political pundits do is they try to capitalize on this politically. The left, the ungodly, the Babylonians, they go political on this. And they target guns. They want to target the instrument rather than the person. And that's been their problem every time there's a gun shooting, is they want to target the gun rather than the person, the instrument rather than the motive. And of course, we know that the globalists, the leftists, all hate the Second Amendment, because if they're going to get power, the one thing that stands in their way is an armed populace. And they know that. And that's why some of our foreign enemies like China and Russia know better than to attack America, because if they do an attack, people are armed to the teeth. There's over 400 million guns in the United States, and they know that. And so does the globalists, and so does the leftists. And so they never really can have full control until they take away our guns. So anyway, this has been their crusade. And it's not about them caring about people being killed by guns, because if they were so worried about people getting killed by guns, then they need to go to Chicago and Detroit and Washington, D.C. and look at all the violence that happens. And they never say anything about that. They only do it on these occasions, okay? And we know that. We know it's a political reason. And again, what's the whole purpose of this? In order for them to get control, they have to make an argument to get rid of our guns. They're going to have a hard time doing that, but they're going to do their best to figure out ways to do it, possibly through a digital currency, that you cannot buy guns or ammo with this digital currency that's coming, or something, being highly taxed on guns and ammo, or whatever, or hurting the manufacturers of guns and ammo so bad that they go out of business. I don't know, but they're going to take full aim at that. So listen to this Babylonian puppet, Joe Biden, who's doing what he's told to do. Listen to how he politicizes the gun issue rather than this Ramos guy. Watch this.
As a nation, we have to ask, when in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby? When in God's name we do what we all know in our gut needs to be done? It's been 3,448 days, 10 years since I stood up at a high school in Connecticut, a grade school in Connecticut, where another gunman massacred 26 people, including 20 first graders at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Since then, there have been over 900 incidents of gunfires reported on school grounds. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Santa Fe High School in Texas. Oxford High School in Michigan. The list goes on, and the list grows when it includes mass shootings at places like movie theaters, houses of worship, as we saw just 10 days ago, the grocery store in Buffalo, New York. I am sick and tired of it. We have to act. And don't tell me we can't have an impact on this carnage. I spent my career as a senator and a vice president working to pass common sense gun laws. We can and won't prevent every tragedy, but we know they work and have positive impact. When we passed the assault weapons ban, mass shootings went down. When the law expired, mass shootings tripled. The idea that an 18-year-old kid can walk into a gun store and buy 2 assault weapons is just wrong. What in God's name do you need an assault weapon for except to kill someone? Deer aren't running through the forest with Kevlar vests on, for God's sake. It's just sick. And the gun manufacturers have spent 2 decades aggressively marketing assault weapons, which make them the most and largest profit. For God's sake, we have to have the courage to stand up to the industry. Here's what else I know. Most Americans support common sense laws, common sense gun laws. I just got off a trip from Asia, meeting with Asian leaders. And I learned of this while I was on the aircraft. And what struck me on that 17-hour flight, what struck me was these kinds of mass shootings rarely happen anywhere else in the world. Why? They have mental health problems. They have domestic disputes in other countries. They have people who are lost. But these kinds of mass shootings never happen with the kind of frequency they happen in America. Why? Why are we willing to live with this carnage? Why do we keep letting this happen? Where in God's name is our backbone to have the courage to deal with it and stand up to the lobbies? It's time to turn this pain into action for every parent, for every citizen in this country. We have to make it clear to every elected official in this country. It's time to act. It's time for those who obstruct or delay or block the common sense gun laws. We need to let you know that we will not forget.
So as you can see, he politicized it. Went right after the Second Amendment. He calls it an assault rifle. That's a pejorative name for it. It's not actually an assault rifle. It's just a rifle, okay? But that's a pejorative to get people to think, oh, they're using military weapons or something. They're not either. It's just a rifle. Anyway, again, notice what Biden did. He wouldn't target Ramos. He targeted the gun, okay? Here's the problem. If you're gonna blame the instruments instead of people, then Biden, why don't you blame drugs for killing so many people? That's the instrument if you're gonna do that. Why don't you blame the drugs? Why don't you stop the drugs? Why don't you lock up the border and stop the cartels from coming in with bringing all their fentanyl into our country? Why don't you do that? Because guys, the issue is not the issue. The issue is they want control. And they want to take away our guns. That's the whole point. The globalists and elites have done this in other countries. There's no doubt. And that's the reason why they have more control than they do over Americans. So my thing to Joe Biden, why don't you blame cars for killing people? They kill people. They've been used to kill people. Why don't you blame violent video games? Why don't you blame the rope that people hang themselves in suicide? Why don't you blame music? Why don't you blame lockdowns? Oh, and by the way, Joe Biden, this Ramos guy, he went dark when the lockdowns came upon him, like it did to a lot of people. It made people depressed and created suicide to skyrocket. And yet, he went dark when the lockdowns happened. So thank you, Tony Fauci. Thank you, Joe Biden, okay? You contributed to this. And why don't you blame alcohol for killing people? You won't do that, will you? You know what funny thing, guys? In the 60s, people went to school. In the 50s, went to school. And they'd have gun racks in the back of their truck. And they took their guns to school. And they would go hunting or whatever after school or whatnot. And yet this didn't happen in the 50s and 60s. Why is it happening now? See, they won't say why it's happening. They just blame the gun. But they won't realize that the society they have created by kicking Christianity out is a society that creates monsters. And they say this doesn't happen in other countries. Yes, it does. America's right in the middle of the pack, so it does happen in other countries. And in other countries that don't have guns, the perpetrators use knives. That's why I think in England they've outlawed steak knives because people use knives. They use cars. They use their hands. They use all kinds of extreme things. And they do it. So it doesn't stop it. If you take away guns, it doesn't stop it. People still do what they want to do because the society is creating monsters. And a monster will kill you with their bare hands. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they don't have guns. Criminals find a way to kill people and murder people. And they'll find whatever it is. If it's like going back into the Bible with Cain probably getting a rock and hitting Abel over the head, or however means he used. He didn't have a gun. Murder has always been with humanity. It's in the heart of humanity. And unfortunately, our society doesn't train people to respect life because they have taken thou shalt not murder out of the schools. They've taken thou shalt not murder out of society. And the problem is when you don't value life, you do indiscriminate killing. It doesn't matter to you, let alone all the other issues that contributed to this guy and contributes to society being so violent. We are in the days of Noah. There's no doubt about that. This is the violence that Noah saw because the people are just simply ungodly. They were following demons and Nephilim and things like that. And that's what's happening today. These people coming in our society are following demonic influences. That's what's happening. These politicians, these global elites, I'm sorry, they're just nothing but demonic forces using them. And that's why they have created a major problem morally for all the countries of the world. And folks, they don't care about people getting killed. They really don't. In fact, they want to depopulate the planet. Because if they did, they would address the spiritual vacuum and they would just address the mental health issues. They would teach biblical morality and realize they have a vacuum in the school systems. And on a practical level, if they really cared about kids, they would have armed security all over these campuses. But these campuses are so moronic and idiotic by the administrators that are godless, they think it's a good thing to be a gun-free zone in a school. And you want to say, that is the stupidest thought, a Romans 1 mind I have ever heard. Where do criminals target? They target soft targets. Criminals don't attack a police station. Criminals go where they know there's no guns. And some of these schools are so stupid, they advertise a gun-free zone. So the criminal knows there's no one there to fight him. The criminal knows that they might have one security guard on campus, and that guy has no gun. And what is that guy supposed to do if a gunman comes on the campus? Is he just going to show his badge and say, stop, I have a badge, don't try to attack us? Is that going to work? It is the most idiotic thing I have ever seen with our schools. But this is what happens when you have a Romans 1 mind. You don't think clearly. They think gun-free zones are going to protect them. It's the opposite. If you had armed staff and armed security guards all over the campuses, not just one, but a lot of them, then that would help. But that just solves the problem on a surface level. The problem goes way deeper than that. The problem is a spiritual issue. And I know the school systems are never going to address that, but on a practical level, why don't they hire more security? Why don't they put that into their budget? Why don't they train their teachers to use arms, especially the ones who want to use them? Why don't they? Why are they without security? I don't get it. And it makes our kids vulnerable. And that's why these people, they can tell you all day long that they care about kids. They don't. Because if they did, they would do something about it. They would secure all entry points. They just, there's so many things they could do, but they don't do it. They don't do it. So what you're seeing when a shooting happens like this, and these political pundits, these leftist, globalist, Babylonians, go political on this, behind it all is they've got to figure out a way to de-arm American citizens. And so they're not done. They're trying to figure this out. They know they're going to have a hard time getting rid of the Second Amendment, even though all these Hollywood elites and stuff are saying, we got to get rid of the Second Amendment. We need to repeal this. And you have even politicians saying this. It's just insane, right? But they're going to find a way around it somehow. And they want to take our ability to defend ourselves from a tyrannical government. You understand that the Second Amendment in the U.S. Constitution is not about hunting. It is not about how they portray it to be. So it's about defending yourself when government goes bad. And by the way, does the Bible support having arms for protection? It sure does. The Bible also supports defending yourself if someone's to break into your house and attacking you and your children and your wife, that you have the ability to defend them. And Exodus 22 says that if you end up having to kill the guy because he's attacking you and your wife, then the blood guilt is not on you. It is on the individual that came and tried to kill you in your house. So on 3 counts, the Bible says you can defend yourself and supports bearing arms. Now, I want to take you to the Gospels. At the night of Jesus' arrest, I want you to see something in there. Verse 35, and this, I believe, is in Luke 22. And he said to them, when I sent you without money bag, knapsack, and sandals, did you lack anything? So they said nothing. Then he said to them, but now he who has a money bag, let him take it, and likewise a knapsack. And he who has no sword, let him sell his garment to buy one. Now, why would he tell them that? Because in essence, what he was saying is, I was protecting you while I was here. I'm going back into heaven, and you're not going to have my special protection anymore. Therefore, you guys need to buy a sword and make sure you're armed. That's what he was telling them. And then he goes on and explains what he's going to do. And he says, for I say to you that this which is written must still be accomplished in me. And he was numbered with the transgressors. For the things concerning me have an end. And so he just tells them, what's prophetically going to happen in the near future, where he's going to go on the cross, right? So in verse 38, they come back and they said, Lord, look, here are 2 swords. And he said to them, it is enough. Now, a lot of people don't understand that last phrase. The last phrase, people are mistakenly interpreting this as him saying, guys, you didn't understand what I was saying. I was speaking metaphorically. No, you have to know the culture back then and what was happening with Roman imperialism. Jesus tells them to buy how many swords? 1. Carry 1. Okay? What's the point of that? Under Roman law at the time, you were permitted to carry 1 sword. Under Roman law, if they saw you holding 2 swords or carrying 2 swords, then that meant you were an insurrectionist and you would be arrested. So when they come back and he says, look, Lord, here's 2 swords, he says that is enough. He's basically saying, don't carry 2 swords. Don't draw attention like that. You're going to be seen as an insurrectionist. Carry 1 is the point. So to put it in modern day terms, he was if they're carrying swords on them, it would be like him telling us, carry a gun, carry a knife, whatever you can do to protect yourself. That's what that means. It is not a metaphor. It is literal. And let me add one more thing to this sword carrying in the day. Did you know the apostles were carrying swords with them during the ministry of the Lord? How do I know this? You continue reading Luke 22 and start in verse 47. And it says, and while he was still speaking, behold, a multitude. And he who was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them and drew near to Jesus to kiss him. So this is the same night, right? On the betrayal, and here's Judas coming to betray him, right? But Jesus said to him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? And then look at what 49 says. When those around him saw saw what was going to happen, they said to him, Lord, shall we strike with the sword? Notice what they say. Shall we strike with the sword? Here's my question. What sword? Well, the answer is they were carrying swords. Do you want us to retaliate to protect you with our swords? It shows you that the disciples were carrying swords. Verse 50, and one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. Now we know that to be Peter. So where did Peter get his sword? Oh, it was on him. It was his personal sword. And he decides to strike one of the servants of the high priest. And basically what Peter was getting ready to do was cleave his head in half. That's what Peter was getting ready to do. But the guy must have moved his head or something like that. And as Peter's sword comes down, it strikes the right ear. Because Peter was going for right in the middle of his head. He was going to cleave that guy's head, split it open. Here's the point. They were carrying. They were armed. And that was in Jesus' day. So this idea of pacifism is wrong. Pacifism comes from pietism, and it has created a lot of problems in Christianity. There's a lot of Christian denominations that embraced pietism and then embraced pacifism. Pacifism is a heresy. I'm sorry, but it is. The disciples were carrying swords, for goodness sake. That's where Peter gets it, and that's what they were saying. Do you want us to pull our swords out? Anyway, the Bible allows for self-defense. In Nehemiah 4:14, it says, and I looked and arose and said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. Now, we're not talking about a spiritual fight or a metaphorical fight. They're being called to fight for Israel. Okay? Defend Israel. Do what you need to do. Fight. So this, you can see in Scripture, it doesn't advocate pacifism. Israel was defending its land at the time in Nehemiah. They had a right to defend themselves, and so do you. Well, people will come back, progressive Christians, liberal Christians, and even people of the society say, well, doesn't it say in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill? Well, it doesn't say thou shalt not kill. You're wrong. It says thou shalt not murder. And that is a big difference. There are times when the Bible says that you are allowed to kill, especially in war or capital punishment, or just like in the Exodus 22 passage I just showed you. If someone breaks in and you kill him and he's trying to kill you, then you don't have the guilt. So what the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not murder, is different than killing. Killing is allowed for capital punishment, war, and defense. Okay, what is thou shalt not murder? Thou shalt not murder is the idea that I go, or you go, or anyone goes and kills an innocent person for no reason whatsoever. So what does thou shalt not murder mean? Well, it means that the person premeditates in their mind through hatred the idea of killing somebody, murdering somebody, and they go do it. And they didn't have the right to do it. They took an innocent life. That's the idea of murder. So, murder is different than killing. So this is why the left, the Babylonians, and even progressive liberal Christians say, well, this doesn't make sense. You're against killing babies. No, it's murdering babies, but you're for capital punishment. Well, yeah, because murdering babies is different than capital punishment of killing somebody convicted of a crime because they killed somebody. That's totally different. And if they can't see the difference, then that's on them. But we're not conflating the two. So let's go back to this shooter. What would allow him to get this way? Well, I can tell you, a godless and demonic society, a godless and demonic home life. That's what. It's very simple. And this is what the politicians are never going to address. He is a result of the society they have created. So if you look back to Scripture and what Paul tells Timothy and predicts to Timothy in 2 Timothy 3, 1 through 4, he tells you what's going on in our current day and time. He says this, but know this, that in the last days perilous times will come. Okay? So Our society has created an environment in which all these enumerated sins that Paul is going to enumerate in this list here that you're going to see in just a second are basically celebrated and rewarded. When society celebrates sin, you create monsters, right? They don't want God to be in society. They don't want you talking about him. They silence us. And what vacuum have they left when they've kicked the Bible out and Christians out and Jews out and everything else? It's replaced with the spirit of Antichrist. It's replaced with doctrines of demons. That's what's pushing through in American society today, and what most of Western society. It is Antichrist spirit stuff. It's demon stuff. Okay? And so that is what creates perilous times, and thus creates monsters and zombies. So the first thing Paul enumerates, he says, for men will be lovers of themselves. Well, guess what? That's what our society teaches, self-love, narcissism. Our social media platforms really enhance this. All these people that get on these social medias, it fuels narcissism. I mean, the people that get on social media, they want to advertise that they went to lunch somewhere, or they went on a vacation, or they did this, or they did that. Like anyone cares. Who cares what you're doing? But in their minds, they think people care. So they post pictures of themselves all day long doing stupid things. That's narcissism. And our society and our social media platforms create that in the person. It tells them, you're great. You have an audience. You have so many followers. And they've done nothing in their life. They've achieved nothing. And so that's what our society's done. Even in our public schools, they have told children, you're special for no reason. You are a wonder kind for no reason. They could get all F's and they say, you're special, you're wonderful. And then at the same time that they pump these people, inflate their egos for having accomplished nothing in life, at the same time, they teach immorality to them. So they become a narcissist, but a wicked narcissist, because that narcissist thinks that they can do anything they want to do. That's what they've been told. It's based on a fantasy of themselves, that a narcissist becomes their own God. You know, and how did that start? You know, obviously in the schools and even in the sports programs where everyone gets a trophy for participating. Yeah, everyone, gets moved along in school, even if they can't read or write or do math. No child left behind. We don't want to hurt their little egos. Yeah. We have society worldwide that are a bunch of narcissists, self-love, as Paul called it. That's creating monsters. Let's talk about the other thing Paul says, lovers of money. Well, not only does our society teach the love of self, but it teaches to love the God of money. If you go to a business school, you're not taught business ethics. You're taught how to make the most money and trample on everybody on the way to the top. There's no ethics involved. That's the problem with business. There's no ethics anymore. These people don't have any morality that do business. They're always shortchanging people. They're always cutting corners. They're leapfrogging. They're cheating. They're doing all kinds of stuff, doing hedge funds, all that stuff, because they serve the God of money. They have no morality. And so that's our society. And how do they make sacrifices to this God of money? Well, they sacrifice themselves. They sacrifice us. They sacrifice society. They don't care how much taxes you and I have to pay, as long as they get what they want. They don't care if they drive up the prices of inflation and gas. They don't care. So whatever ends justify the means, they'll do it. If they want to destroy our economy, they'll do it for it. They think there's a lot of money to be made by destroying our economy and going digital and going to a global system. They don't care. All they care about is power, prestige, materialism, and control. That's it. So we now have that in our society. It's an epidemic proportion, and they don't care. The biggest wealth transfer is about to happen if we go to digital currency. Let's continue on. Paul says there will be boasters in these perilous times. What is that? Well, you can see this on social media, and you can see this on, any news outlet or any political person. All they do is boast. They use the social media to boast, and they're nobody. They've accomplished nothing. Like these Hollywood elites, all they do is boast. These leftists, all they do is boast. Who are these people? They're prideful people that want to tell you how great they are. That's all they are. And they're everywhere. Paul says they will be proud. And one of the things you never see people in our society do is admit their guilt for anything they've done. And that's a sign of pride. They're above the law. They don't make mistakes. It's never their fault. And then they know it all. They think they are wise. They think they're smart. And they might be intelligent, but you can't correct them. They don't have wisdom. You can't debate with them. They get hostile with you. I mean, Joe Biden says it's not his fault for inflation and rising gas prices and supply chain problems and a horrible economy. He doesn't think it's his fault. This is called pride. And our schools, colleges and universities, our society, Hollywood, everyone teaches people to be prideful instead of humble. Humility is not a value with the Babylonians, and neither is the truth. They do not value humility, and they do not value truth, so you will never see that practiced by them. Then Paul goes on to call them blasphemers. There will be blasphemers in these perilous times. Well, obviously, you know what blasphemy is. And I want to give you an example of how bad it's getting, okay, as far as blaspheming God. This came a while back when Jerry Nadler said that God has no will in Congress. Watch this video.
It's not clothing or personal style that offends God, but rather the use of one's appearance to act out or take on a sexual identity different from the one biologically assigned by God at birth. In his wisdom, God intentionally made each individual uniquely either male or female. When men or women claim to be able to choose their own sexual identity, they are making a statement that God did not know what he was doing when he created them. I'm going to quote directly from Dr. Tony Evans' commentary Bible on this passage of Scripture. Men and women equally share in bearing the image of God, but he has designed them to be distinct from and complementary toward one another. The gender confusion that exists in our culture today is a clear rejection of God's good design. Whenever a nation's laws no longer reflect the standards of God, that nation is in rebellion against him and will inevitably bear the consequences.
Gentlemen will suspend. The House will be in order. Gentlemen may continue.
I'm going to read that line again. Whenever a nation's laws no longer reflect the standards of God, that nation is in rebellion against him and will inevitably bear the consequences. And I think we are seeing the consequences of rejecting God here in our country today. And this bill speaks directly against what is laid out in Scripture. Our government, through this bill, is going to redefine what a woman is and what a man is. It can be anyone who identifies in that gender.
Mr. Stubbe, what any religious tradition ascribes as God's will is no concern of this Congress.
Guys, that's just blasphemy. Jerry Nadler just blasphemed, and he doesn't care. How about this other guy, a very evil guy, Yuval Noah Harari? Have you heard that name? That dude is wicked evil. Notice the blasphemy he says. Watch this video.
And I think that fake news have been with us for thousands of years. Just think of the Bible. But there is
The past controls us through various stories that ancient people invented and we still believe. We think about ourselves as belonging to a certain nation like Israel or Brazil, and we believe in a certain religion like Judaism or Christianity. So, when I ask myself, who am I might reply that I'm Israeli, I'm Jewish. Yet, all these nations and religions are fairly recent developments. While humans have been around for more than 2 million years, none of our nations and religions is more than a few thousand years old. Brazilians, no Portuguese, no Chinese. Judaism is only 3,000 years old. Christianity is about 2,000 years old. And even after they appeared, all these religions have undergone repeated changes. The Judaism or Christianity of today are very different from what they were 1,000 years ago. They are not eternal truth, but rather human creations. I mean, all this story about Jesus rising from the dead and being the Son of God, this is fake news.
Wait, that's not... Can you believe that? Jesus, the resurrection, fake news, the Bible, fake news. If this guy doesn't get saved, either now or in the tribulation, the lowest parts of hell are reserved for people like this. When you blaspheme outright against the Son of God, against God's word, it's not going to go well with you at the great white throne judgment. You better get saved. But that's the blasphemy, and they continue to do it all the time. And another characteristic, Paul says, they will be disobedient to parents. Now, as you know, this is off the charts. People have been trained not to respect their parents. And you know who the culprit is? The schools. The schools taught them this. The schools have taught the kids and the colleges and universities not to trust their parents, not to listen to their parents, that their parents are dumb, don't know what they're talking about. They're stupid, old-fashioned, antiquated. And they have been told, these kids, to believe in the educators, the educrats, rather than the parents. And so they buy into it. And the families don't help this out either. Fewer and fewer families even go to church anymore. They just don't. So these kids grow up with not understanding godly principles like respecting authority. They've never heard about it. They don't even understand the concept. So they grow up and then they work in jobs and they don't ever respect their boss. And so they go from job to job because they keep getting fired because they can't get along with anybody. So this disobedience to parents has to do with rejecting godly authority. And do we see that? Absolutely. The next characteristic, unthankful. You realize, in America at least, that people live here who absolutely hate America. And you want to say, why do you live here? They don't see how wonderful freedom is, and that this freedom that they hate allows them to act the way they do. And so they abuse freedom. They're not responsible with freedom. Responsibility with freedom doesn't mean you get to act any way you want to, but they take it as such. And they're ungrateful for it. They don't care about the lives that died for it. They don't understand it. They could care less. So they undermine the very value, which is freedom, that allows them to act like a fool and despise the country that it gives them their freedom. And so they're unthankful. They're ingrates. And what do they want? They actually want less freedom for others. They want to ban freedom of speech. They want to ban freedom of religion. They want to ban the right to bear arms and freedom to protect yourself. They don't like freedom. And they particularly liked when the lockdowns happened and limiting people's freedom of movement and medical freedoms. They love this one. Interesting thing about the lockdowns, you know this guy Ramos that shot up a school? His friends say that he went dark about 2 years ago. I wonder why. Oh, that was the time when the shutdowns happened. Yeah. So do not think for a moment that these lockdowns didn't have an effect on people. They did. They caused unbelievable depression, unbelievable suicide rates, and created monsters like this guy that were ready to pop, thanks to the totalitarian, authoritarian people who hate freedom. They are responsible for this. Paul goes on and says, unholy. The characterization of unholy people in these perilous times. Well, that's easy to see. Paganism, raw, rank paganism and Satanism has taken over the culture. There's no decency in it anymore. Everything's on the table. Anything you watch is on the table. Shows that used to be friendly to families are not. Organizations that were friendly to families are not, like Disney. Disney now is promoting grooming children in their new cartoons and movies and such. They're promoting LGBT agenda, transgender agenda. They're promoting all of that. They're grooming people. And obviously, the schools are promoting this too. It is flat out rank paganism. And it's taken over the culture. Paul goes on and says, not only will they be unholy, they will be unloving. Have you noticed how hateful, absolutely hateful, the left is? The left, the Babylonians, they all have a simmering hate that you can see in them. And they look for reasons to hate. That's why they stir up problems, so they can hate more. Hate gives the ungodly meaning in life, right? They got to hate that which is good. And they got to love that which is bad. So they hate the good, right? Because what does Jesus say? Light has come into the world, but men love darkness rather than light. So if they love darkness, they hate the light. And it gives them a cause or a purpose for their life, that they're going to fight against the light and hate it. And this is what happens with the Romans 1 mind. They're given over to their depravity, to a depraved mind, to the darkened heart and all that. And so without God, you don't have any meaning and purpose. So they have to look to create problems so they can hate something. And that's what we see through society. You can't talk to anybody or debate with anybody. Most of the people have turned into thug type of mentality. They'll just fight you over it. They don't care. They'll just physically harm you. They don't care. This is what's happening in all the major cities. They're just a bunch of thugs running around. It's a dystopia. Yeah, that's perilous times. The other thing that Paul says they're gonna be is unforgiving. Unforgiving. Now, this is interesting about the religion of wokeism, because wokeism is a religion, by the way. It's the Babylonian religion. In wokeism or in Babylonianism, there is no forgiveness. Like, for instance, if you were born white, you're automatically a racist, and you can never be forgiven for that. You have white privilege, and there's no redemption in that. And the idea in the other values of wokeism, if you break those rules, you're cast down, you're fired, you're deleted, you're shadow banned, you're erased, and you are never forgiven again. There's no redemption in wokeism. And so people have become unforgiving. Paul goes on and says slanderers will be prevalent during the perilous times. Well, think about that. All you have to do is look to the media. All you have to do is look to social media. All you have to do is look to all these people that tweet and put on Facebook and TikTok and all this junk. And all they do is slander. The politicians do it. Hollywood elites do it. The news groups do it. It's slander. They know how to do it. They sling mud. Politicians do it. And we see it everywhere. That's basically how people operate. They operate on their social media platforms as slanderers. What else did Paul say? He said that they would be without self-control. Without self-control. Are we seeing that with Antifa groups and BLM groups that riot? Are we seeing that with the pro-abortionists that surrounded the Supreme Court's houses? Are we seeing that? Yeah. And nothing's done about it, by the way. They don't go to jail. They don't get in trouble, even though it's illegal to do that to a Supreme Court justice. None of them went to jail for doing that. So again, they're without self-control. Let me show you a video. And this is the video of a graduation in America, and a brawl ensues. Now, folks, I have never seen anything like this in any graduation whatsoever. But it tells you that people have no self-control, even at a graduation. Watch this. Can you believe that? I can't wrap my arms around that. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. That's the monsters that this society creates. It creates people that have no self-control. They can't even control themselves at a graduation. I've never seen that. Have you? That's insane. But we should expect to see more and more of it because there's no self-control. Paul also mentions the word brutal. They're brutal. Well, I can tell you straight up what that means. As an example, it's abortion, the murdering of babies in the womb. And in America, we're over 16 million babies have been slaughtered in the womb since Roe v. Wade. And now our courts are thinking about overturning that and giving to the states. And so now everybody's flipping out. And nothing really is going to change, guys. It's because the states are still going to have it. And a place like California is going to have abortion tourism. They'll pay for your hotel, your food, your lodging, your gas to come have an abortion in California. So we're going to have abortion tourism. But it's brutal. If you understand what they do to that baby in the womb, it is absolutely brutal. It's the worst thing you could possibly imagine. These people are on the level of Nazi soldiers, Mengele, just ripping people apart. It's that bad, guys. Here's what I want you to see. They teach this to our kids, and they grow up thinking that abortion's a right to murder somebody. Watch this demonically inspired girl who goes on social media and simply mocks life as she tells her newborn infant that she could have killed the infant. Watch this.
I could have killed you, but I chose to let you live. I chose to let her live, as in I had a choice. All women should have a choice.
Do you realize what you just said? Killed. I cannot wrap my brain around this, no matter how I look at it.
If you don't want to use the word kill, that's fine. If you want to use the word kill, that's fine. When you use hand sanitizer, you kill germs. I could have simply chosen to let you not exist, but I let you exist. I let you form past the zygote phase.
Is that better?
So yes, I realize what I just said, and I stand by it. If you want to get an abortion, get an abortion. If you don't want to get an abortion, don't get an abortion, but don't try to oppress my right.
Does that make you sick? It is so evil what that girl, that girl doesn't even deserve a baby when she has an attitude like that. She thinks she's God. That poor baby. I feel so sorry for that baby having that kind of mother. What a repugnant, demonically possessed girl that is. And she's a girl. She's not a woman. She's immature and she's demonic. But that's the brutality of what's being bred in our culture. It's that brutality. Paul goes on and gives another characteristic, despisers of good. Well, of course, when you hate the light and love darkness, you hate anything good. And so that's why they have reversed morality. They have taken out biblical morality and made an inverse. They do the opposite, which is a part and parcel of 180ism or lawlessness. So lawlessness now is taught in schools and societies. God says this is good, they say this is bad. God said this is bad, they say it's good. And so it's a reversal. And so everything's been turned on its head, and that's what kids are taught in schools. They're taught wokeism, guys. They're taught CRT. They're taught sexuality and promiscuous sexuality, homosexual, lesbian, transgender, everything at very early ages. That's a despiser of good. They love evil and hate the good. And basically, too, because of this, of introducing this new Babylonian morality, it has stirred up hatred in them towards people like you and me. It has caused division. So here you and I holding on to the Bible and what God says, and we become the most hated of those people because we diametrically oppose that which they love. They love sin, they love evil. We stand for righteousness' sake and for what God says. And so it causes division in the country. Christians and Jews are now the most hated groups in America. And you have to understand that. So you can imagine if this gunman, and he did go to public school, was taught to hate America. He was taught to hate people. And what do they teach in these school systems? They teach these kids that they are victims and that white evangelicals are the oppressors, or the Jews. The Jews and the white evangelicals are the oppressors of society. That we are for slavery, they say, or that we are systemic racists. We are, whatever. We're against women's rights, reproductive rights, as they call it. And so they actually cause a hatred in them towards us. And that's done all the time in school. And it's a classic Marxist tactic of portraying an oppressor and then telling the person you're the oppressed. And that's where the hatred comes from. Oppressor versus oppressed. So they do that. And so when they're taught that they're the oppressed, then it makes them the victim, and they hate everyone else who is a perpetrator in their minds. And so what you see from these people, they hate the concept of marriage between a man and a woman and having children. They hate the concept that God made two genders, male and female, and that's who you are at birth. They hate the family unit, so they try to devise other ways, two men, two women, whatever, polyamorous or whatever. They hate that, and so they change it. Understand this, that shooter, that Ramos kid, was from a broken home. No dad, drug addict mom. So he didn't have the ideal. He wasn't taught the ideal. And so he comes from a dysfunctional home. If you look at all these people who are in prison, if you look at all the criminals, look at their home life. Their home life is broken. Just like this guy. This guy was set up. This guy was at risk already. But they're not going to discuss that because in their minds, you can have any type of family and it's okay. Biblically, the ideal is a mom and a dad in a home raising kids. That's the ideal. I know sometimes we can't do that, but for the majority, if you want a sane society and a stable society, if you don't have that and you don't make that the ideal in the society, you're going to have dysfunctional families, and that will create monsters. And so this continued indoctrination to hate that which is good. They hate Israel. They call it an apartheid state. They hate the remnant church. They call us Bible thumpers or right-wingers or whatever. They hate biblical sexual relations because they want to have sex with anything and everything. They hate absolute truth. They hate the fact that the Bible says there's only one human race. It doesn't matter where you come from, your nationality, ethnicity, we're all human. We descend from Adam. We come from Noah's 3 sons. And what they want to do is portray us and set us apart by dividing us, saying, no, there's this group and that group and that group. And they create tribalism, they create division, and that's Satan's ploy, to create division for groups to hate each other for no reason, other than maybe skin color or something like that, stupid stuff like that. But that's what they do. They hate that. They cannot stand the concept that all are derived from Adam. They can't stand that because they don't have a fight if they do that. They want to fight by dividing people and causing hatred. That's what they want. Another characteristic of perilous times is what he terms traitors. There will be traitors, not only in the church, but in society. So we already know that on the politician level, many politicians have already sold America out. They sold America out to China. They sold America out to the globalists, the one-worlders, and they currently are selling out America to the World Health Organization and given sovereignty of medical sovereignty to the World Health Organization. We have traitors. Do we have traitors in the church? Absolutely. There are more Judas Iscariots in the church than I have ever seen. These traitors in our midst have pretended for a long time to be Christian, pretended a long time to go along with the program. And then in these perilous times, they turn on you like a sheep killing dog. They stab you in the back and they don't think twice about it. They walk away and say, you deserve to be stuck in the back. They will slander you, make stuff up, gossip. And so it evidences what they are. They are traitors. And these traitors are nothing but hypocrites. According to Jesus, the hypocrites will be assigned a certain place in the Messianic kingdom. So some of these traitors are real believers, but they have traded. They're traitors to the faith. They're traitors to other believers. Look how many churches became traitors and pastors became traitors when they decided to shut down their church for an entire year. Look how many pastors became traitors and took PPP money from the government and proceeded to take a long vacation on the government's dime. That's called a traitor, okay? That's called a traitor. A traitor's also apostatized as well. The faith that they once held, they don't hold it anymore. They've moved off of the traditional values of Christianity. Now they accept gay marriage. Now they accept transgender, whatever. That's a traitor. And that's what's happening. And you must be aware of it. Then he goes on and says, another characteristic of these perilous times is that people will be headstrong, bullish in their thinking, stubborn like a mule, right? Have you noticed that you can't tell people anything? You can't debate with them. You can't penetrate their head. They get hostile. It's their way or no other way. That's called headstrong. They're bullheaded. They can't allow any other thought into their mind. Just can't. They're headstrong. Can't tell them anything. Can't preach to them. Can't give them the truth. They're just bullheaded. He says another trait will be, they will be haughty. Haughty. Haughty is the idea of pride, but kind of hostile with it, showing it, being arrogant and stuff like that. A good example is just recently what happened with Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is haughty. She's an unbeliever, she's a New Ager, but she's haughty. And she remarked that she was disallowed to receive communion by the Archbishop in one of the Catholic dioceses up there where she lives in San Francisco, over her stance on supporting the murdering of babies in the womb, right? And so, this Archbishop of the Catholic diocese says, you're not going to receive any communion. Well, she went on a show and condescendingly and arrogantly responded to this bishop through the interviewer. And believe it or not, this ungodly woman invoked Matthew 25 completely out of context and said Matthew 25, and she was referring to the sheep and goat judgment in Matthew 25. She says that's the agenda of the church. She couldn't be further from the truth. Matthew 25 is the sheep and goat judgment that happens after the second coming. It's not the agenda of the church. The agenda of the church is the Great Commission, Nancy. But again, I don't expect her to understand this, but it's the way she's coming across. You're arrogantly citing the Bible and you don't even know what it means. And then she notes, she thinks that she's smart and intelligent. She notes that, well, the bishops haven't barred communion lawmakers who back the death penalty, which is also condemned by the church. You see what she did? She equated the death penalty to abortion, which we mentioned is different. The death penalty is allowed in the Bible. Murder is not. It's two different things. Of course, whether she knows it or not, or she's using it against them as if people are stupid, she used that kind of line of thinking. It's the most illogical thing you could possibly make. But it comes from a haughty spirit. She equivocates death penalty to abortion. It's not. And anyway, and she goes on and says, which is also condemned by the church. The church never condemned the death penalty. The Catholic Church never condemned the death penalty. The Catholic Church used the death penalty for thousands of years. What are you talking about? But anyway, this again is haughty. But not only we're going to see it in people like Nancy Pelosi, you're going to see it in the church. You're going to have people that think they know the Bible and they don't. And they're going to push their agenda, all that junk on us, and you're going to have to defend yourself and fight them off because they're haughty. Haughty people cause problems in the church, and there's a ton of them. But there's more than ever. I've never seen so many haughty people. I went to a prophecy conference that I did, Colorado Springs. I had a lady come up to me and says, I'm totally wrong. And that's what we call a haughty spirit. Really, I'm wrong. I've done the research. I know my Bible. I've taught the Bible for 30 years. What are you talking about? And again, that's just a haughty spirit. That's what's everywhere now. Constant people challenging you when they don't even know what they're talking about. Then Paul gives another characteristic. He says they will be lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Hedonistic, in other words. Well, right away, you already know where that's at. That's the LGBT agenda. That's the transgender agenda. That's the whatever agenda. Do anything you want that makes you feel good. Or identify with whatever you think you should identify instead of how your creator created you. Do whatever sexual perversion you want to, even if it destroys you. Go ahead. If you want to do drugs, do them. If it makes you feel good, get some fentanyl. Who knows? Who cares if it kills you? As long as you feel good, right? And you got states legalizing drugs. That's hedonistic. And so you think about this gunman, this Ramos guy. He was a hedonist. He just did what made him feel good by shooting up people and killing them. That's what made him feel good. That's the monster that you get when you tell people the satanic lie, do anything that makes you feel good. See, that kid in the public schools were taught, you're your own God. He was taught the end justifies the means. He was taught, do what makes you feel good. The last characteristic Paul says is that people will have a form of godliness but deny its power. Now, we've seen this in Christianity and in the church, that people look religious, they wear religious garb, but there's nothing inside of them. They're dead. There's no power. There's no Holy Spirit inside of them. It's life. They're lifeless. And so we see all these false teachers, false prophets. Then we see gay and lesbian people pretending to be pastors, but they're wearing like religious formal attire. Or you have transsexual people pretending to be pastors over a church wearing religious garb. And then you even see some of these churches having, drag queen Bible story hour in their church. And they're wearing their drag queen outfits and all that, but wearing religious robes and stuff. Or you look at the Pope, he wears religious robes, but he's ungodly, right? That's the idea, having a form of godliness but denying its power. There's nothing real. They have no real power from God. It's just fake. It looks like it on the outside, but it's nothing. So here's a great example of this that happened this week. This is a Lutheran pastrix. And number one, she shouldn't even be a pastor, but she's woke. So her version, in her woke version, I should say, she said that Jesus called the Syrophoenician woman a racial slur and got rebuked by the woman. Jesus, she says, repented and was forgiven, she said. She states, it's such a blatant example of the humanity of Jesus. He screws up bigger here than in any other story that I know. But this Jesus is tired, she said. He is frustrated. Whatever is going on with him. And she goes on and says, he calls her people dogs. This marginalized, outcast woman whose daughter is sick, she comes to Jesus for help, and he calls her a dog right to her face. I mean, this is ridiculous, guys. She continues on, this having a form of godliness, denying its power woman. She should have slapped him. We would have forgiven her for that, yes? We would have understood. She could have told him off, yelled and screamed in his face. We would have forgiven her for this too. But she does none of those things. So she makes the woman out to be the hero and not Jesus. Okay, Jesus is the bad guy in the story according to this fake pastrix. And she goes on to say, well, she improvs. And she says, I would bet good money that Jesus wasn't expecting that. Like, I don't care if he's the Son of God. He didn't see that coming. Oh, my land. I cannot believe someone is even blaspheming, saying that Jesus sinned. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But this is what we're talking about. By the way, she doesn't understand the cultural context. No false teacher does. No one that has that is having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof can even understand it, because she's probably not saved. She's a full-blown false teacher. Okay? Maybe she is a believer. If she's a believer, she's a full-blown apostate, I can tell you that, and never knew the scriptures. But anyway, what is the basis of that story? This is how simple it is. This woman wants to be healed, and Jesus is testing her, and he's showing an example to his disciples. She's a Syrophoenician woman. That means she's Gentile. So she presses, and the disciple says, give her what she wants, and let's get rid of her. But Jesus kind of ignores the whole situation, but he's doing it on purpose. And eventually she pleads out to him, and he says, I was only sent to the lost sheep of Israel. So what he was explaining to her, that I have a duty to the Jew first, and then I will go to the Gentiles. But my priority is to the nation of Israel. They receive the blessing first, and then the Gentiles second. So that's what he was trying to explain. And so he continues on. She presses him, Lord, help me. Again, he comes back and says, it is not right to give the food of the children to the little dogs. And then she responds, yet that even the dogs receive the crumbs off the master's table. What is that? It is not a racial slur. It's an illustration. That's how dense this woman is. Jesus is using a family illustration. He is picturing an illustration that he is the parent, the Israelites are the children, and he's demonstrating priority, that the master of the house, the parents, are going to make sure the priority is to feed the children first, then you feed the family pets second. He didn't call her a racial slur. It's an illustration that you have these dogs in your house, and you don't neglect your children to feed the dog. You feed your children first, and then you feed the dog. And that's what he was saying, that the priority right now on my mission is to Israel. I must feed them first, and then I can feed you. And it's not dog, like just flat out dog. It's house dog, little puppy, little dog, a house dog. That's how you translate that. And I know that's probably more than what you wanted to know, but this is how bad they mess things up. This is ridiculous. But this is wokeism, and this is what Paul predicted. And you know what Paul said about these people? And from such people turn away. Just get rid of them. Get them out of your life. Now, I'm not talking about not evangelizing. I'm saying when these people do these kinds of things, get away from them. They're toxic. They're monsters. They're not going to help you. Those kinds of people, like that shooter, that guy was a monster. Thank God a policeman took him out. Thank God he's getting his justice now. So guys, this is a picture of the last days. These are the perilous times that we're seeing. Our society has created this, and they're at fault. They're the ones at fault. And our politicians and lawmakers are at fault for not correcting this. They won't bring in morality back. That's the basis of everything. And why is God letting us see all of this? Why is he letting us experience perilous times? God is showing us why he must judge humanity. God is showing us the evidence of why humanity deserves the tribulation. When you see this, and you see people who don't care and they're unloving and unforgiving, they deserve the tribulation. Our hope is that people get saved before the tribulation and get raptured. But God is showing you how bad humanity is getting worldwide and why it deserves the tribulation. Now, God is still holding out his offer of salvation through his grace and mercy. And he offers it to anyone who will take his invitation. And our job is to make sure we carry that truth out. But in the end, what we are witnessing is the evidence for why the tribulation needs to happen. The perilous times have come. With that being said, make sure that you get on our Rumble, BitChute, YouTube accounts, follow us there, and make sure you get on our text alert system. If we have to alert you to anything, follow this link and fill out your information, and you'll be on our text alert system. And lastly, pray for us. We get a lot of attacks all the time. I mean, it's constant attacks. And you just finally just kind of get used to it, but we need prayer for that because it's just unrelenting. And pray for our strength and our fatigue factor and our spiritual fatigue factor, because it kind of wears you down. You get attacked so much for telling the truth. It's ridiculous. And so pray for us. But also, if you can help us financially, we're a church trying to get its legs under itself. We're building a building, and hopefully by the fall we'll have that, but we have to pay that building off. We got to expand our ministry here, with internet, and we want to make sure that we're still feeding people out there. And this takes a lot of resources to put this together. A lot of staffing is required for this. A lot of instruments, a lot of video devices, and all kinds of recording stuff is needed. So we can use your help in that, and we can just use help for the general church, man, to pay the bills. We have a lot of things going on in our church, and we're expanding, but we need help. So if the Lord puts it on your heart to help us financially, that'd be great. For those of you who already have, thank you so much. It has expanded the ministry of Rock Harbor. We're reaching more and more people because of you. So thank you for that. And remember what Jesus said. When you see these things begin to happen, look up, lift up your heads, for your redemption draws near. God bless you. We'll see you next time.